Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all jumping on here already. Welcome, Ian. Welcome, Dimitri. Good to see you guys today on the LinkedIn Lunch live stream. It's starting to get better. It's starting to roll off the tongue a little bit more. So, the LinkedIn Lunch live stream. We'll be looking at LinkedIn, looking at some different posts here. As always, if you are watching live, feel free to jump in the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from, if it's the first time that you've been here or first time in a long time. And always feel free to participate. Feel free to share your ideas, thoughts, opinions on the things that we look at, or on most other things. Really, we're kind of free form here in the chat, so feel free to talk about whatever. If you have a question specifically for me as you're watching, certainly feel free to put those in the chat as well. You can do at DevMentorDave. That gives a little box on it, just kind of catches my attention a little bit there as I'm glancing down and looking at it. So hopefully I catch it if you put that on there. If not, I'll still try to follow along, especially if there's not that many people in it, then it's easier to follow along. But even then, there can be some pretty quick discussions in the chat, so I may miss it. So do mention me if you want me to see something specific or respond to something specific. So, as always, we're going to be looking at LinkedIn posts. Obviously, what people post on LinkedIn are their opinions based on their experience or their things that they found interesting that they're trying to share. And so, as I'm interacting with this content, remember that what I say is my opinion, also based on my experience. So it's not necessarily that I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong, or whatever. But it's just that these are opinions based on experience, and hopefully it's helpful to you. Certainly feel free to share your opinions, and even argue with me if you want to spend the time typing in the chat, because I get to just talk. You have to actually type it. So feel free to argue with me or share your different opinions if you'd like as well, and I'll tell you why you're wrong. No, I'll just enjoy interacting with you, because really that's the whole point of live stream, in my opinion, is to get opportunities to interact with you guys. Going through LinkedIn is just a way of doing that. It's a way of having some content on here, as well as giving opportunity for us to interact. So certainly feel free to jump in the chat, ask questions, share your thoughts. Even if your question is not about what we're specifically talking about on LinkedIn, that's perfectly fine. We'll go a different direction if that's what we need to do during the live stream. So absolutely feel free to jump in with anything that you think is pertinent or not pertinent as we go through this process. So again, if you're watching live, jump in the chat, say hello, and we'll get going here. So again, we do this every Tuesday and Thursday generally, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central United States time. And we try to be as consistent as we can. I think this is like our third or fourth week that we've been doing this. So hopefully it's been interesting for you guys as we've done this. But I think it's sometimes it's hard to find different content to talk about, different topics to talk about. So hopefully we've done that a little bit today. So we'll see. All right, let's jump into the first one. I didn't really put these in the order that I think I'm going to do them in, but we'll see. We'll just kind of jump around willy-nilly however we feel like. Okay, so the first one here says, why pay for a service when I can just roll my own authentication over a weekend and never worry about it again? And if you scroll down, if you start looking at the actual code here, you'll realize this is very much tongue-in-cheek. This is certainly not something that that this person is really advocating for. The idea here is that generally there are things that you can write yourself, and sometimes, especially as a junior developer, it's a good exercise to try writing certain things yourself, things that are maybe a little bit more complicated, more complex, more advanced, just because it will help you appreciate what other people have done. I think that's the biggest thing to me when I try to write something that's a little bit more complex than what I have recently or even what I have in the past. Especially if it's something that I know is already out there, something that already exists. then it's certainly a learning experience, and it reminds me of all the things that I don't know, and all the things that you don't always think about when you're writing your own code, and when you're looking at a service that somebody provides, either the options or the just the settings that are available. Oftentimes, just bring to mind a lot of things that you're like, man, I never even thought about that when I was trying to create this. And as you can see, like this authentication's two methods. It's very simple and not really a very good practice. But that's like if true equals true, then return false. Um, Again, this is just a joke that somebody put up, but it's a good reminder that um, there are there are going to be things that maybe you're not qualified to build yet, that maybe you're never really qualified to build, and that's okay. Sometimes it is okay to just use a service that somebody else has created, whether that's a paid service or a free service, a library or a package. This is something that I've been on the fence on for a while, not just as like a mentor for junior developers, but also just as a developer myself, as somebody who works for a company who's in a leadership position, trying to make decisions about, what we do use and what we don't use. For example, a lot of the projects that we use at the company that I work for is Laravel, and we use Laravel. The PHP Laravel framework for a lot of our projects, and there are tons and tons and tons of packages out there that do a lot of different things that, we have some really bright people that work for us, and we could probably figure out how to do those things and get it done. But at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to what's going to be best, not just now for us as a company making money, but what's going to be best for the client long term, as far as making sure that it's maintainable over the long haul. I think that's something that, especially when it comes to custom code, we have to really balance. We have to really uh, think about what we're using and why we're using it. That's why, especially a lot of times when you look at what packages you're pulling into your front end applications, right? So all those npm packages or yarn packages, right? All of those JavaScript libraries and frameworks. Which ones are you choosing, and why are you choosing those? Are you just choosing them because they're the first ones that came up on your Google search? Are you just choosing them because somebody else recommended it? One of the things that I try to make sure and do when I'm looking at a specific package is figure out how recently has that package been updated, and how frequently is that package updated, because what you want is something that's going to be maintainable and something that's going to be maintained. If you're building an application that is dependent on other libraries, on other frameworks, you want to pick libraries that are going to be updated on a consistent basis. And that's one of the downfalls of choosing libraries, but it's also one of the downfalls of writing your own code or rolling your own solutions, like this post is talking about, right? So when you roll your own solution, when you write your own code, there is some advantage of being able to do everything the way that you want to do it. Maybe you could even get rid of some extra cruft that's not necessary in some of the packages or libraries that you're using or that you would use. And you only write the things that you need for your specific application. So there are some advantages there, but some disadvantages are that a lot of times when you're building a project and you hand it off to the clients really just are not good about maintaining code. They like to buy a product and be done with it and just have it work. They don't understand the reality that code goes stale, that languages evolve over time, that even servers themselves become deprecated. Like they don't understand the reality of the movement of technology. And we all recognize that technology moves and changes, simply because we have to have a phone every couple of years. It seems like sometimes some people get a phone every year. I don't know how they can afford that, first of all. But we forget that technology is going to change, and as technology changes, what was good 3-5 years ago probably is not working as well as it should. Probably is not as efficient as it should be. And so companies want to pay one thing and use it for years and years and years. And unfortunately, software just isn't really like that if you're going to be cutting edge, if you're going to stay up to date in the market. So that's something that you have to keep in mind when you're writing custom code, is that code is going to be stale probably faster than most of the libraries or the packages that you include. So while you can probably write your own authentication, hopefully better than this one, it's probably better to use something out there that already exists, whether that is a package or whether that's um, an actual paid library or system or authentication or whatever it is that you're putting into it. That's why, again, I really love the Laravel ecosystem, because it has a lot of that stuff already built in. You don't even have to really think about it. But you can also manipulate it and change it to the way that you want. Anything that has stuff built in obviously is going to face bloat. So there's always going to be a trade-off with that. But I find generally, if I can find a good package that's been updated frequently and recently, looks like it's going to be well maintained for a while, I would rather use that than try to home roll my own stuff, just because it's going to be more secure, hopefully. It's going to take less time, hopefully, and it's going to last longer, hopefully. So there is no guarantee in any of that, but I do typically prefer packages. It just speeds up the process most of the time when you're developing an application, and especially when you're dealing with clients who have tight budgets. Anything that you can do to help them feel like they're getting more for their money is always going to be a good thing. So yeah, if you do decide to home roll your own authentication or other things, certainly don't follow this practice right here. So let's see. Yeah, that's true. They don't understand why they need a service agreement, right? And they often are given a service agreement. And here's another thing. Because I did this for a long time as a freelancer, I did not want to offer service agreements. I did not want to offer anything that was going to force me to have to interact with that client long term. Because the longer you interact with a client, the more opportunities there are for a falling out or a disagreement or things like that. If you can just get the project done and get it off your plate and they're happy, that feels better. But the reality is they need a maintenance agreement. And if you're the one that built it, I mean, you make the most sense to be the person to offer that maintenance agreement. But it can be difficult to manage. And that's the same whether it's from an individual standpoint or whether that's from even a company standpoint. Providing a service agreement or a maintenance agreement can be very tricky, especially when it comes to having employees available to work on those when you don't have a designated required amount of hours per month or per week or whatever it is. So depending on the service agreement, they can be hard to handle the more of them you have, to where you've got to have somebody full time that just does service agreement work, and that's not necessarily full time work. So that can be a little bit difficult to manage from an individual perspective or manage from a company perspective too. But the reality is most clients really need some sort of service agreement unless they have their own people internally and you're just doing some extra work for them, like staff augmentation or something like that. So a guy that I've talked about before on the live stream, on the Saturday live stream, I think, or just a video, whatever. His name's John. He's an older guy that I worked with, that we hired at a former company that I worked for. And he and I had lots of great conversation. It was awesome. But one of the things that he would tell me, and he had actually built multiple businesses and sold them, things like that. He was basically working for us for fun, just because he liked learning new things. So that was kind of cool. But one of the things that he told me that really has stuck with me over the years is whatever it costs to build your application, it's going to cost that much to maintain the application. And um, I'm trusting his words on that because he's had to deal with that in the past. I don't know from my experience if the cost is equal, but the reality is certainly there that you're going to have to spend money to maintain the application that you had built. And so one of the things that we need to do working with clients is help them understand that because things move quickly and because they change over time and because even the packages that are being used get changed and the versions that you're on are not supported anymore, things like that. We have to help them understand that when they start the project, there's going to be maintenance at the end. You have to make that clear for a client, and you have to help them understand why that is. Otherwise, you end up with clients who have the same application for a decade or more, and they haven't had any work done on it, and then it stops working, and you can fix it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work any better. One of the clients that I worked for 15 years ago, man, yeah, 15 years ago now, they had the application that I built running for 10 years before it was replaced, I think, and it was not good. It was old jQuery code and jQuery UI and stuff that, we will not we can't talk about anymore. But but they actually still were using it even though they bought a different software. They were still using the software that I wrote as kind of a backup system, and it got to the point where the server that it was on was like the server company was like, we gotta kill this server, and so I was able to actually put it on a Docker image for them to use, but even finding a Docker image that would support what was built was a little difficult. So you certainly want to make sure that you communicate to clients that you're going to need to be able to keep things up to date, and that's going to be part of the cost of owning software. If you buy software from a big company, you're paying a licensing fee usually most of the time every year and per seat. Like if you're building your own custom software, then you should plan to put money aside every year to make sure that it's staying maintained. So that's something that if you're doing freelance work, you should definitely have that conversation with the people that you're interacting with, your clients, and let them know, look, once this is done, you're going to want changes. That's the other thing. Like, clients always want changes in the future. That's just the way that it works. Once they start using the product, they're going to find other things that they want to add to it, things that they want to change about it. And so if you have some sort of maintenance or service agreement in place before you get to that point, then you can just kind of flow right into that, and it makes it a whole lot easier in the end. Spent a lot of time talking about that based off of this one post, but we kind of got off in the weeds there a little bit. Let's see. Dimitri says, all of these packages, I use Flash Security, and it contains a lot of abandoned or almost abandoned packages. To choose a part of the project, especially a single package, is a big deal. Yeah, absolutely. That's something else to look at when you're looking at a potential package. Does it use packages that are outdated? And that's part of that maintenance process of, is it constantly being updated? Is it constantly, is it something that's maintained by a person or a group of people? That's why typically the best packages are, from a long-term perspective, are going to be maintained by companies, not by individuals. And individuals make some great packages, but they're not always very good at maintaining them because most of them are open source, and that takes time, and they're not getting paid for it. So that's kind of hard. Yeah, exactly, Ian. Cloud platforms change, or they spring up. I remember when AWS was pretty much the only game in town. And then, we had Azure, and we've got Google Cloud, or whatever it's called. I think it's just Google Cloud. Those things change, and sometimes one option becomes better, or one option is just cheaper. I'll be honest with you. There are some things, I'm an AWS guy, but there are some things on AWS I'm just like, this is expensive. they definitely make a lot of money on their services for sure. So those things change, and sometimes they change for the worst. Sometimes they change for the more expensive, and you need to move off to something else. You know, that's something else you don't always keep in mind. Like for example, for our church website, we have S3 storage in AWS. Well, that's great, and it's fairly cheap, but the more stuff you have stored in it, the more expensive it gets over time. So that's something to keep in mind too. What you're using now, what's it going to look like in the future? So, again, sometimes it is good to roll your own stuff and have your own setup. There are other options to S3. Minio is an option, or you can put it on, I think, pretty much any self-hosted server that you wanted to. So there's lots of options out there depending on time and availability of you learning how to set it up and get it working, and you know all that fun stuff. Ian says, I hate upgrades that take things away. Yeah, absolutely. Upgrades that take things away, or change the way that settings are managed, or increase pricing. Yep, those are the ones that really I hate the most. So they're not really upgrades. All right, let's see what else here. This will just be real quick. I'm gonna jump on my own hobby horse here. So this has nothing to do with most of the posts. This post is really just a curated list of things to help you learn. But for me, this is my issue right here. So FANG companies are hiring again. Who cares? Again, this is my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. I'm sure there are many people who do. I get it. I understand why FANG companies are top of the list for a lot of people. If you don't know what a FANG company is, has nothing to do with vampires, right? So it's things like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. I forget what the other A is. Is it Airbnb? Apple. Sorry, Apple. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So the idea is those big upper echelon large corporations where they hire hundreds, if not thousands, of developers. So here's my problem. Not that those companies don't have great opportunities. They absolutely do. They pay very well, which is one of the main reasons why people want to get a job at a FANG company. You're going to have a much higher income level. But they also do things like force people to come into the office, things like that. And I don't know. I've just personally, never had the desire to work for any of those big companies. And this could just be a personal preference thing, most likely is. I just don't feel like working for a larger company, I have much of an impact on the company itself, on the success of the company itself. You feel more like a cog in a machine than you do like somebody who's actually driving the machine, if that makes sense. So the biggest company that I think I've ever worked for was a marketing firm here in Kansas City. And it's a pretty large marketing firm. We had clients such as, I'm trying to think of them now. The ones I worked on were Sprint, the phone company, and T-Mobile. I also worked for a rental company, a large equipment rental company, and they had other clients, like I think Gatorade was a client, things like that. Big company. So it was a big advertising firm. And I was hired onto a project that there were 50 plus developers working on this project. Multiple spa applications were being added to an Adobe, what is that called? Their content management system. I can't think of it right now off the top of my head. Adobe Experience Manager, AEM, I think. Anyway, so like 50 plus. It could have been more. That's just kind of a rough estimate. We had a lot of developers working on multiple aspects of this project, multi-million-dollar project, and and when you're on a project that's big, like that's just one project that this company was working on. They had many other clients, um, and both of the teams that I worked on were over 15 developers. I want to say one of them was 20 plus developers, the other one was 50 plus developers. And when you are working in that type of environment, you're just you're just doing work, right? It's just a job. You're not really, it doesn't feel like you're impacting anything in the company. The main reason why I went there at the time, apart from the fact that I needed a job, the main reason why I chose to work there was because that was a place where I knew I'd be forced to learn some of the front end JavaScript frameworks that I wanted to learn, and I could kind of do that on the job, but be pushed to do it. So I'd have to do it. I couldn't just spin my wheels at home learning those things. So it was a good experience for me. I got what I wanted out of it, but it's not a place that I would have wanted to stay long term. And that's kind of odd for me because I typically try to be a person that wants to stay long term. We'll look at another post that kind of talks about that here in a minute. But I'm the type of person, I like to be at one place. I want to be impactful in the place that I work. I want to do work that makes a difference for not just the clients, but makes a difference for the company, and feel like I've actually accomplished that. Working for that other company, it just never felt like I was really more than a robot, really at the end of the day, more than just somebody who was completing tickets. And, I kind of want something a little bit more than that. And I feel like these FANG companies, which are even bigger than that company that I worked for, I feel like most of what they do is just ticket work. It's just what we call code monkeys, right? It's just doing busy work. It has to be done. Somebody's got to do it, but it just doesn't always feel like it's that impactful. And so I've never been a huge supporter of people working really hard to try to get into a FANG company. I think it's one thing if you interview for it and meet the requirements and they hire you, that's great. For me, going through this process of going through like a list of these things, it's not a high priority for me. And I wouldn't necessarily encourage, especially junior developers, to go down that path, personally. Is it wrong? Nope. Plenty of good people work at those places. In fact, I have actually worked with two different people who either have worked at Google or since I worked with them have worked at Google or currently are still working at Google. And great devs, really smart people, absolutely smart people, probably smarter than me for sure. So I definitely think it's a great opportunity if you can do it, but I don't have a desire for it. And I don't think that the work like this, putting in this work specifically to get a job at one of those places, to me doesn't seem worth it. But for somebody else, it may. If you can really change the trajectory of your life by getting hired on at a place like this, then more power to you. Go for it. Put the effort in. Follow things like this. Learn the things that you need to do that. I think for most people, though, a lot of this stuff is kind of a waste of time. And you have to take into account the reality that those FANG corporations are very notorious for laying people off, and not just one at a time, like laying large groups of people off. So that reality is possible anywhere you go. No company is 100% free of layoffs or money issues. That's a possibility no matter where you go. But I just feel like those large corporations are just, that's what happened to me at that advertising agency. Was they laid off, I think 52, if I remember correctly, developers at one time. And then they had more shortly after that. So it's just there's a lot of volatility in those big market jobs. But there can also be a lot of opportunity. And if you fit into that culture, then there could be a great career for you. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Not a big Fing person, um, but take that obviously with a grain of salt. No, I don't want to do that way. This is the other one that I wanted to mention, kind of along the same lines with that whole loyalty thing. So this says loyalty is not staying with a company forever. I highly agree with that. So I'm going to highly agree with most of this stuff here. um, in the past, the idea of loyalty was that you stayed with a company 20, 30, 40 years and you were locked into a monetary agreement that was going to set you up for retirement. And it was a mutual thing where loyalty did mean sticking with the company. It meant not going to a competitor, right? In fact, I feel like nowadays, at least in the United States, I think non-competes are either are unenforceable now to some degree. I'll have to go back and look at research that for sure, but I feel like I heard somewhere that non-competes are basically unenforceable these days in the United States. So this idea that I'm only going to work for this company, or this idea that I'm never going to work for a competitor, really just doesn't make sense in our current industry, in our current marketplace, when it comes to employment. So what used to be thought of as loyalty is not really loyalty anymore. It's almost stagnation. It's almost a bad idea to stay in the same place too long. Now, I say that knowing full well that I would prefer to stay in the same place for many, many years. I'd be perfectly happy to be with the company that I'm at until I retire, which is more than a decade away. So that would be perfectly fine with me. But the reality is that a lot of companies just are not set up for people to advance and grow. They're not designed for people to really stay with them long term. They're designed to have turnover when it comes to the amount of money that they pay for the services that you provide, when it comes to benefits, when it comes to the type of work that they do, and whether or not they expand that type of work and give you more opportunities to learn new things. There's lots of different aspects of that relationship that go into this question of loyalty, or not loyalty as much, but long term, how long you stay there, longevity, right, of your position. Whether it's longevity of how long they keep you in that position or have that position, or longevity of how long you stay there before you get bored and move on to something else. So I do agree that loyalty is no longer a matter of just sticking it out with the company that you're currently at. I like the way that this is put here. So loyalty is giving 100% effort while working for a company, and in return receiving 100% support from the company for growth and change that improves one's quality of life forever. So the first part, obviously, is the part that we can control. For me, loyalty looks like I'm going to give 100%. It's interesting that he doesn't say 110%, right? Now, there are times where you just need, in order to be useful to the client, in order to be helpful to the company, you need to give some extra time. You need to do some extra work. There's going to be times where you need to put in more than 110%. And hopefully there's times because of that you can put in 90%, to make up for that, to where it does balance out to giving 100% effort. But this is kind of honestly one of the reasons why I got into development as an actual job, is because the company that I was working for at the time, I really couldn't even give 100%. Like there was not anything for me to do 100% of my time working at the company. So I was building reports and they were coming from one system, and I was literally copying information from one system into spreadsheets. The reason I was doing that is because we were supposed to be getting some software that was going to be handling that, and I was going to be helpful in that process of implementing it. Strangely enough, that software never actually materialized while I was there, or from what I heard after I was there. So that job would have definitely been going and going and going for a while had I stayed there. But I couldn't even give 100% because I would literally come into work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I would work, depending on the day, anywhere from 2 to 4 hours that day doing those reports, doing those manual reports. And I literally had nothing else to do in that job. And to the point where my direct manager literally apologized to me for not having something else for me to do. And so that was one of the big catalysts for me moving somewhere else, because I couldn't actually give 100%. I mean, technically I guess I was, but I couldn't really actually put in a full day's work and feel fulfilled, right? So, but then there's also the alternative where they want you to be available, 80 hours a week, and that's that's 200%, and that's not feasible long term, right? So the goal for me of loyalty is whatever job I'm at, my goal is to do everything that I can that is reasonable in the time frame that is reasonable, and work as hard as I can to give the best that I can to that company in a reasonable amount of time and process, right? Again, I'm not looking necessarily for it to be easy. That's not the goal. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it needs to be reasonable. It needs to be hard work, difficult work. Doing what I do now is at times easy, and at times it's really frustrating, right? Because you're managing projects, and managing projects can be going well at one point and not so well at another point. And so there's going to be ebbs and flows in whatever job it is that you're working in. But loyalty is not just being like, well, I'm going to be here for you no matter what. Loyalty is, I'm going to give you 100% of the effort that needs to go into this as long as I'm here. That's no guarantee that I'm going to be here very long, but as long as I'm here, I'm going to give maximum effort. And I think this is really important, especially when you know that you are leaving. It is so tempting when you are leaving to just let things slide. If you've given 2 weeks notice or something like that, and your company wants you to stay and help, like transition information, things like that, it's so easy to just kind of not give maximum effort because you're not going to be there. It feels like, well, why should I work that hard helping the company when it's not going to matter in 2 weeks? It all goes back to your reputation. There are some people that I would never hire back that were good employees but did not transition well. And that's unfortunate because they did the job okay most of the time, but when it came to those last few efforts, they didn't care anymore. And I get that. That's a natural human reaction to that process, because you're leaving. You don't really care, right? But it's important for your own reputation. It's important for the way that other people see you, not just in your current job, but in your future job. The dev world is actually a pretty small world, and you can get a reputation, especially locally, that's either good or bad. And people talk, and people who know you, especially if you're connected to them on LinkedIn or something like that, they can find out those things, whether or not you left a company well. So I think, giving maximum effort, giving 100% effort all the way through the process of you being there is really important. Let's see. Ian says Digital Equipment Corporation was layoff free until it wasn't. Absolutely. It only lasts until it doesn't. So yeah, putting put your 100% effort into the transition. It's always going to be better for you in the long term if you do that. So, and then of course there is the other side, right? You still have to, we have to understand that the company is not always going to hold up that other 100%. And that's what you want to look for and try to ask questions about. But I think it's important, the things that he called out here, support for growth and change that improves your quality of life. That might be better time off. That might be teaching you a new skill that allows you to move up in pay scale, or move up in leadership positions or things like that. So it really is a two-way street. Loyalty should be a two-way street. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's a one-way street. But at the end of the day, it's better to give your 100% effort and look for something else while you're doing that, than to not give 100% effort and not be able to get something else because of your reputation at your current company. So my 2 cents here, I pretty much agree with everything that this person says in this post here. So wholeheartedly. All right, so this is another one that hit me especially, and I think it's good even for people like junior developers, right? Again, the focus of this channel typically is junior developers, mid-level developers, people looking to take your career kind of to that next progression, outside of just learning the basics of writing code. And I feel like while there are a lot of people like me here on LinkedIn or on YouTube or whatever that are interacting with people and helping people, there are people in boot camps that are helping people, forums. Obviously, we've got the Dev Mentor Dave Discord server, people in there willing to help out and help mentor you. I think we need to develop a culture in the dev world where everyone is a mentor. Everyone's a mentor to someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is, written down. It doesn't have to be something that is agreed upon with like a contract or something like that, but rather just an attitude. And I think that's kind of where, for me, this slide hit me. It says, be who you needed when you were younger. Be who you needed when you were younger. And for me, the idea here is, when you started out, you needed somebody to help you learn to write code. You needed somebody to help you understand things that you take for granted now, things that are very basic. And the reality is there are a limited number of people who are taking the time to provide that type of help and service. And so if we want to see our industry grow, if we want to see our industry get better in some of these areas that maybe they're failing you right now, maybe you're sitting there going, I wish I had somebody that would help me with X, help me with learning this framework, or help me with knowing what's the next step in my career path, or knowing whether or not I should learn this thing or learn that thing. If you are hitting a point in your career where you wish somebody could help you make some of those decisions, give you some opinions, give you some feedback, think about other things that you might have wanted help with in the past, and find someone else who is just getting started and help them in those things. Be who you needed when you were younger, or when you, instead of younger, well, I mean, technically it is younger because we're all getting older, but be who you needed when you were first starting out, right? So that doesn't mean that you have to know everything. That doesn't mean that you have to be the best person at explaining everything. If you've followed this channel very long, you found out very quickly that I don't know everything. And in fact, there's people talking about stuff in the Discord server that's just like over my head. Some of these junior devs are talking about things I've never even heard about, let alone have any idea how to help them with sometimes. But be helpful to other people, right? Be helpful to other people. Recognize areas that are difficult and at least try to help them out. It may not be successful, and that's okay, but create a culture of assistance and not a culture of alienation. I should write that down somewhere. Create a culture of assistance and not just a culture of alienation, because unfortunately, especially in the dev world, we can hunker down in isolation of learning, and we really need somebody to come alongside and assist us. And sometimes we don't ask for help because we feel like we're stupid if we ask for help. Please ask for help. um, it would be better for you, it would be better for your future employer if you ask for the help now while you're learning, and get the help and know what you need, and then look for people to help. Go on the Dev Mentor Dave Discord server. Look for questions to answer. Go into the crazy world of Reddit and look for things to help people with, or on LinkedIn, or whatever. Find your niche. Maybe it's going to an actual meetup and interacting with people there and finding help and giving help. But we need to create a culture where it's not. There's always going to be competition. All right, there's always going to be competition, no matter no matter what environment we're dealing with from a job perspective, right? Because there's always going to be fewer jobs than people looking for them. That's just a reality. Um, so there's always going to be competition, but we've got to reach a point from an industry standpoint where we understand that the competition and that level of competition needs to grow based on mentoring. Um, I firmly believe that one of the reasons why there's so many junior devs out there that can't get a job is because they have lacked good mentoring. And by that, I don't just mean they've lacked somebody telling them how to write JavaScript better. What they've lacked is somebody coming alongside and saying, hey, maybe focus on this instead of that, because there's some jobs over here that you might be able to get if you spend some time learning this other thing, this other nuanced item, this other package, this other framework, or even language. They don't know because they don't have somebody coming alongside them and helping them. Um, and I wish that we could develop a better industry-wide mentoring process. Maybe the problem is with employers and moving more towards an apprenticeship type situation as opposed to a straight up employment situation. Maybe that's the way to go. I would love to jump into something like that, but there's also a lot of people that don't feel comfortable mentoring or training, and I get that. But even if it's just answering a question, all right, just think about that. Even if it's just answering a question that somebody posts, and you can make it something a little bit easier, a little bit help it click for somebody else. Just think about how you feel when someone helps you, and the gratitude that you have, and the feeling that somebody cares, the feeling that you actually can do this thing because somebody came alongside and showed you this is what you're doing wrong, this is how you can do it. Not in a mean way, but in a helpful way, in a mentoring way. So I know a lot of people that watch this are junior developers or maybe mid-level developers, and you might feel like you don't have a whole lot to share. Take my example of being here on YouTube, because I don't feel like really I have that much to share myself either in most days. But there's always something that you can do to help somebody else. So think about the things that you struggled with as when you're getting started, and see if there's a way that you can help somebody else in that process. Ian says, but don't waste your time on someone who does not want your help. Absolutely. Don't force yourself on someone. That's a really good point. Just because somebody says that they're a junior level developer doesn't mean they're going to be a good mentee. So that's why, again, I wouldn't start necessarily going around looking to be a mentor to people. I would just start giving back to the community. That I think is the more important thing. Go to places where people are looking for help, where they're asking questions, and be the help that they need in those situations. So it's not about you forcing yourself on somebody or pushing for somebody to be your mentee. It's more about being there when they ask the question. and encouraging people to ask questions. But yeah, definitely, if you're trying to help somebody and they're not listening to you, they're following their own path, or they're argumentative, even, definitely, definitely feel free to kick them to the curb. You don't have to be mean about it. You can just kind of stop responding at some point too. Um, we need a page for quotes. I don't know that there's that many quotable things happening here on the on my channel, so I don't think we need anything for that. It strikes me funny. I'm an alliteration guy, so anytime I say something and accidentally alliterate it, it just feels good. Anyway. So this was another one. I'll end with this one, I think, probably. Yeah. So this one just kind of caught my eye. I thought it was an interesting concept. I would be interested, for those of you who are interviewing or have interviewed recently. I'd be interested, leave a comment in the comment section. Oh, excuse me. Too much talking. If you're watching this later, or if you're in the chat, feel free. Can we normalize giving candidates interview questions in advance? I mean, what is this, like a presidential debate? No, I'm just kidding. Can we normalize giving candidates interview questions in advance? I'll be honest with you, from an interviewer standpoint, I've never thought about this. I don't think I've thought about it from an interviewee standpoint either. That is interesting. You look at a lot of people putting out kind of a list of standard questions, standard things that you're probably going to be asked in an interview. Those are fairly common. Like the things that you're going to ask I would think, are fairly common, unless your company has some really weird questions. I don't know what needing those ahead of time would help with. To me, it feels like maybe you're not doing as much research on the type of questions that you're probably going to get, but who knows? So this person says, today I had my first interview where I was given the questions beforehand, and it was amazing. I was more relaxed and comfortable, which allowed me to show my true personality during the interview. Now, that is interesting. To be more relaxed. So my thought is, would you be more relaxed and comfortable, or would you be less yourself because you're able to act, right? If you know what the questions are, you're able to present yourself better. That's kind of a tough one, because I think in some regards, I agree, you would feel more comfortable and relaxed, but in other regards, I feel like you might have some people who are going to put a better foot forward than who they are, if that makes sense. I do like the idea of trying to create an environment that is much more comfortable and relaxed. Generally, when I interview people, it's very conversational. I do have questions that I'm going to ask, but a lot of times I end up asking questions more from an interaction standpoint than from a list standpoint. So obviously I have questions of things that I want to get to, but I also want to listen to what they're saying and interact with what they're saying. So that's why, to me, in my opinion, a good interview is going to be more of a conversation. It's going to be more of a back and forth, a give and take, because I feel like when you converse with people naturally, or as close to naturally as you can in an environment like that, that in and of itself helps people relax and feel comfortable and let down their guard and be a little bit real. I don't know that telling them the questions ahead of time is going to do that, because again, for me, it's a conversation. It's an opportunity for me to get to know this person, not just get a bunch of questions answered so that I can compare to them somebody else. I think that's another part of the problem with a lot of interview processes. You've got people doing the interviews that are not necessarily going to manage the people that are being hired a lot of times. And I mean, I just know for example, that marketing firm I was talking about, when I interviewed there, the person I interviewed with was not the person that I worked for. It was another team lead, so that was helpful. But like, it was a little bit weird because, again, they just had questions that they asked. I would rather have the person that's most likely going to manage that person get to know them in an interview, build some sort of rapport with them in the interview itself, or at least attempt to, and know then through that if this person's going to be a good fit, not just from a skill set, but from a relationship standpoint. And if you have to manipulate that by giving somebody the questions ahead of time, I don't know that that gives you a better understanding of who that person is and what they're like. Now, the second point, I was able to give more detailed, thoughtful answers, which allowed me to fully show what I know and what I'm capable of. That I could certainly understand. If you know the answer, the questions that they're going to ask, especially follow-up questions, because again, that for me, that's that conversation piece, is those follow-up questions where you're telling me about something and I want to know about this piece of what you just talked about. That's hard to give ahead of time because you don't know what they're going to talk about. You don't know how they're going to answer the other questions. So I could see where this would come in handy if you're somebody who's going to think through that. I think, again, though, a lot of those questions are going to be pretty much similar from one company to another. Like, if you're not taking the time ahead of time to sit down and think through detailed answers to those questions, are you really going to, if they give them to you ahead of time? I don't know. This person seems to have. I don't know. I'm on the fence here. It sounds intriguing, but I don't know. The more I talk about it, the less convinced I am that it's something that I think I would do. The interviewers were able to focus on my responses, skip over questions I'd already answered, and come up with relevant, spontaneous questions, which allowed us all to have a genuine conversation. So I think that's the. So here's my take on that. What that tells me is that you're not preparing for the interview very well in the first place. So like, if you should know the things that you want to talk about. Because somebody put in here, question to expect. Tell me about yourself, right? Yeah, exactly, Ian. Like, that's like the most common question that you see in interviews. Tell me about yourself. So if you don't know what you're going to say to that question, that is an extremely common question. Like, you should not be stuttering and stammering. You should have something rehearsed, right? I have the same career progression, the same talking points, about my development experience that I have used for years. It's the same thing, and it very much is a conversation. And I think that's why, if you don't feel like you're having a conversation, how much of that is on you as the interviewee in how you're answering the questions. One thing that you can do in your responses is ask them questions. If I'm unsure about something, I will ask a question. If they try to ask me something I don't know for sure what they're talking about, I'll ask them to clarify what they're talking about. It is both on the interviewer and on the interviewee to turn the interview into a conversation. Yes, I understand that a lot of interviewers are just going to go down a checklist of questions, but that doesn't mean that you have to just give them a checklist of answers. You can be conversational. There you go. You can be conversational with them, even if they're not very conversational themselves. I've done that before. It does take time. It takes practice. It takes probably doing a lot of interviews that you don't want to do. But I just don't know that the answer is giving the questions ahead of time, because, again, I think most of the questions people already know. And if you don't do any research and you don't actually think about these things before you go to the interview, for me, that's more on you than it is on the company. And I'll be honest with you, I'm much more likely in these types of situations to side with the interviewee. because I think there's a lot of problems with the way that companies do interviews and the interview process and the job search process. But this is one I think, I don't know. Would it be nice if they have special questions? Sure, that would be great to get in advance. But I feel like if you're just being honest and if you know yourself, you know your history, you know your experiences, like you are the expert on you. And so you should be able to talk about you. And I feel like if you can't do that, um, and talk about what you've done, like there you need practice at the end of the day. So maybe there's some specialized things where getting the questions would be helpful. But I the more I think about this, the less I think that it really is that helpful. I think it's more of a mindset of how you go into the interview. Um, you either go into the interview with fear that they're going to ask you something you don't know, or you go into the interview with the goal of selling yourself. And I think that's the difference. Either you assume that you're going to find something that you can't answer, or you're going in there not really caring what question they ask, just knowing whatever they ask, I'm going to sell myself and make myself look good for whatever the question is. And even if that means I don't know the answer, or they ask me about things that I've not worked with, I'm going to sell myself in that situation when it comes to my work ethic, when it comes to my ability to learn things quickly, stuff like that. It's not just about what you know and what you've experienced. It's about, a lot of times, it's about what you can do to sell yourself to that company. And that's where I feel like, again, being able to have a conversation about yourself and do that regardless of how they're managing the interview is really more on you as the interviewee. Oh, hey, Mel. Good to see you right when I'm getting off. Sorry. Let's see. This is likely the worst question interview portion for everyone, including the hiring company. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be, Ian. It doesn't have to be. See, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Like that question that we all look at and we're like, that's such a stupid question. Tell me about yourself. That is the perfect opportunity for you to sell yourself, right? So think about, what do you want to communicate to this company? What do you want them to take away from you? Like, you can, if you are given that question, you can literally take control of the interview. And that's what I think people don't understand. So somebody says, tell me about you, tell me about your journey, whatever the general question is, you've literally been given control of the interview to express whatever you want about yourself and to sell yourself to this organization. And we don't spend very much time thinking about that. We think about, we try to be too short. I would rather talk most of the time in the interview and tell them about how good of a developer I am, and all the things that I've accomplished and ways that I've helped companies grow, and all these things that I want to communicate to them. I would rather them look at that checklist and be like, well, he talked about that and that and that and that, and have to skip questions, but have it be a conversation where they feel connected to me, and they feel bought into my journey and my passion and my desire to make them a part of my journey. You can, if you practice it, you can put yourself forward, and you can in some ways take over an interview process. Now, they're still in control because they've got the questions, right? But have your own questions. Think about what a general I'm going late, I need to get off. Think about what a general interview group of questions looks like, and build your about me around that. Answer all the general questions with your my journey story. Don't just give simple answers. Be conversational, and I think then you don't need things like this. You don't need people to help you along the way. So, sorry, I don't know why I got so passionate about that right there, but I did. So, there you go. Dimitri says, I used to interview people who applied for microelectronics repair technician. I usually sent them some docs for machines we repair to look at, so they come in, we can talk about it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, technical information that you're going to need to talk about makes perfect sense. That seems like a great idea. General interview questions, maybe not so much. uh, Thanks for the like, Mel. Dimitri says, I love that question. I can tell about my journey so much. Usually I ask how far away I should start, school or college. That's a good question. That's a good point. I'd be like, I was born at a very young age. No, yeah, that is a good point though. You're like, where do you want me to start? What's funny for me a lot of times, because I'm a pastor as well, so my education is actually in theology. And they usually have questions about that. So I let them ask that question just to give them that level instead of just jumping there. So I usually jump on my career journey and not college. So I don't usually ask. It's just when I started the career moving forward. But that's always a fun conversation too. Anyway, yeah, thanks for jumping on, everybody. It's been fun interacting with you guys, hearing your perspectives and questions and thoughts. And we got through several things today. We'll see you all again on Thursday. I've got to jump here quickly and I've got a client meeting. Fun coming up. So thanks for spending time with me, jumping in, even if it was at the last minute, Mel. Good to have you here. And I'll see you guys on Thursday at 1 p.m. and then Saturday at 10 a.m. So I'll see you guys next Thursday. We'll take a look at some more LinkedIn stuff and hopefully find some more nuggets. If you find any that you would be interested in having me take a look at, send those to me. Any people you want me to follow, send those to me, and I will try to make sure that I follow them as well. So I will see you all on Thursday. Have a good one.